Question?
No. Good afternoon, students. I hope you are all doing well. Today we're going to learn about Arctic plants. I'm assuming that most of you have seen plants. Have you ever seen a plant before?
Are trees plants?
Yeah, like trees. Any other types of plants?
My mommy likes roses.
That's great. Where have you seen these plants? Inside or outside?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, we have a tree in my house and we have a tree in my backyard, but I think they're two different kinds of trees because they look different. And then we have little colorful plants around my house that apparently people like, and yeah.
Do you know what type of trees or plants you have in your house or outside?
One with leaves.
Do you know the name by any chance?
Maybe a maple tree.
A maple tree?
Mm-hmm.
And what color is your maple tree?
Red.
Amazing. Now, tell me a little bit about plants. How do plants become plants? Do you know anything about that? How do they grow?
Well, my mom says I have to talk to plants so that they feel loved. So maybe that. And then I also water my plants. Well, they're not my plants, but I water the plants sometimes, and then sometimes I forget, but I don't tell my mom that.
Okay.
And then I feel like they're always getting sun.
So water and sun and a little bit of love. I think those are really great things to help a plant thrive. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Do you know anything about any factors outside of watering and love affect a plant's growth? Do you know something that's like a cycle that helps plants grow?
Like a sun cycle?
Yeah, potentially.
Or like a weather cycle?
Yeah! Do you have any idea of what this could be called?
A plant cycle.
Yeah. So something that's very similar to a plant cycle is called photosynthesis. So I'm going to write photosynthesis on my board. Wonderful. And as we're talking about photosynthesis, do you think sunlight is essential to plant growth?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
How do plants grow in locations where sunlight is limited? So can plants grow without sun?
No.
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 Okay, now let's talk about the environment that plants grow in. So where did the plants that you have grow?
In my backyard.
Just in your backyard?
Well, I see them on the road too, so on the road.
Okay. Out of the cement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in the grass.
In the grass?
Yeah.
Good to know. And what type of conditions do they grow in? Do they grow in the cold? Do they grow in the heat?
Well, where I live is hot and cold,
Ah.
so they don't all die. Only some of them die. But, like, the big trees that I see on the streets never die.
Whoa, okay.
So, like, it's around for both.
So for hot and cold weathers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good thing to think about. I'm just going to write that on the board so it can grow in hot and cold. And can it grow with rain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like water, right?
It is like water.
Wow.
Do you think that helps the plants grow?
Yeah.
Okay.
I need water, so the plants must need water.
Okay. And do you think there's a lot of wind in the places where your plants grow?
Not really.
Sure. Wind. So maybe? Maybe not?
I don't think so. I don't know, though.
No. Okay, we can talk more about that in a little bit. Now, the conditions in the Arctic. Do you know anything about the Arctic?
Penguins live there.
Yeah, so what are the weather conditions like there?
It's icy.
Icy.
There's a lot of fish.
Fish.
That's not weather.
That's okay. Is it
It's
hot in the
cold.
Arctic? Oh, it's cold. Okay, so because we're looking at Arctic plants, let's take down what the Arctic weather is looking like. So you said cold.
Mm-hmm. And icy.
Is there sun?
I don't know.
Okay, we can put question mark for sun. Is there wind?
I don't know.
Question mark for wind. Okay, and now that we are talking about the Arctic, does anyone have any ideas on how plants survive in the Arctic? Because we are looking at Arctic plants.
Maybe like when the ice melts, the plants get the water from the ice, and then it grows.
That's a good idea. Do you want to bounce off of that and keep elaborating?
And then, I don't know what kind of plants there are, but I know that my mommy has seeds at home, and we put seeds in the ground, so maybe the penguins knock them over, and then the seeds spread, and the more plants grow.
That's a great inference. Okay, so before we get into the lesson, let's make some predictions about what makes Arctic plants different from flowering plants. So let's draw it on the board. We'll make a little chart. Now let's start with the weather. So for flowering plants, like the plants you have in your backyard or on the road, what is the weather like that makes those plants grow?
I think warm and maybe rainy, and sunny.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And then the Arctic plants?
Cold. I don't know if it's sunny.
That's okay. And you can say there's nothing else you know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that's okay. Do you predict that there are any factors that are very different that will influence the growth of an Arctic plant versus a flowering plant?
I feel like Arctic plants are short.
Short.
Yeah.
And how would that factor into its influence for growth?
Well, I feel like it doesn't grow a lot because the weather is really bad.
So it won't grow due to weather.
Yeah.
Won't grow tall.
Right.
Okay. Okay, that's a great inference. Do you have any other inferences about before we learn if this hypothesis of won't grow tall due to weather is true or not?
Maybe they're not colorful plants.
You think, what colors would they be?
I don't know. Like maybe brown or green. Like darker colors.
Like dark colors. So
yeah.
Brown,
green. Because maybe there's no sun on the bottom of the earth. I don't know.
No sun. Okay, dark colors. Okay, so these were all really great hypotheses. Today we're going to look at the different factors that influence an Arctic plant, so like the sun, the wind, the temperature, and we are going to compare the factors that influence a flowering plant versus an Arctic plant. So, let us question what influences an Arctic plant to grow.
I see you have all made some good inferences and predictions about how plants grow in the Arctic and what plants generally need to grow. Now in our activity, we will be focusing on non-Arctic and Arctic plants. So what will happen is that you will stay in your small groups at your table. We'll be handing out papers with Venn diagrams on them, and on the board we will be projecting 3 images of Arctic plants as well as 3 images of non-Arctic plants, and it will be your job to write down as many characteristics and physical descriptions as you notice for each of the plant types. So the middle section here will be for any characteristics or details that you find to be similar in both of them, and this chart will just help you understand the differences and similarities between the 2 plant types. We will be giving you 5 minutes to complete the activity. Try to write down as many characteristics as you find possible within those 5 minutes. We'll also be walking around in case you have any questions or get stuck or just need any help, so just raise your hand. I just want to remind you all before starting to really zone in on all of the characteristics and details that each of these plant types have, as well as try thinking of why perhaps these plants have those types of characteristics, such as leaves or branch thickness or growth patterns, different aspects like that. Once the 5 minutes is over and we've all completed our own Venn diagrams, we will then come together as a larger group and create one consensus Venn diagram model onto the whiteboard. Okay class, there's 2 minutes remaining for the completion of the activity. Alright, so time's up. It's time to come back as a larger group, and we're going to start discussing and going over your individual Venn diagrams, and I'll be writing down your main points on the board to eventually get to a consensus model. So let's start with the non-Arctic plants. What were some descriptions or characteristics that your groups found? What other observations did your group make about the flower petals?
They are thin and flimsy.
So would you say that the cross-pollination is a result of its surrounding environment?
Yes.
How so?
Well, if the plant was not in a warm environment, it would not have many insects to cross-pollinate, and they would not be able to grow there.
Okay, thank you for that inference. So would you say that it would relate back to our point about the warm environment, because not only would non-Arctic plants need the temperature from the warm environment to grow, but also the insects in its surrounding environment that are only present when it's warm to grow as well. Okay, great. So we're going to move over from our non-Arctic plant description list over to our Arctic plant list. So what were some observations that your groups found? And does someone want to give a more detailed description about the growth patterns?
They look intertwined and grow on top of one another.
Okay, and anything else that you noticed?
They grow under snow.
Okay. Great, so I think we're ready to close up our Arctic side, and now we're going to start looking at the similarities between the two. So what exactly do you mean by the photosynthesis aspect?
They both need sunlight, oxygen, and water to grow.
Can you give a hypothesis as to how Arctic plants can use water to grow based on your observations that they grow under snow and ice?
The snow and ice give off moisture to the plant.
How so then if it is not water?
I believe it involves the water cycle. Even though they are in different forms, it is still water, just another form.
Okay, great. Thank you for your hypothesis. So now we can see from our Venn diagram consensus model that we've all made together that Arctic plants tend to grow in more harsh conditions like snow, ice, and wind. They have hairier stems, thicker branches, smaller leaves, and they tend to grow closer together. So that being said, I would say that we found more differences between the two than similarities, as the only similarity that we did find was the idea that they perhaps both undergo photosynthesis, meaning that they require sun, oxygen, and some form of water in order to grow and survive. Okay, so now let's look back at our consensus model. What do we notice based on the different characteristics of each plant, keeping in mind our essential question, what factors affect the survival of Arctic plants? Were there any reoccurring concepts that you noticed some or most of the aspects revolved around from our Venn diagram?
The environment plays a big role in the growth and survival of plants as plants adapt to their environment.
And where do we see evidence of that in our diagram? I will circle all the points that relate back to this idea.
I believe all points reflect this. Each plant has different needs and alters its structure based on their environment to survive.
So thank you all for participating in this activity. You all came up with some really good characteristics and descriptions and observations of Arctic and non-Arctic plants, and you will be using this information to answer your essential question in the next stage, and you will find out what factors affect the survival of Arctic plants based on your newfound findings.
Alright, hello guys, my name's Lily and I'm going to be leading part 3 of our lesson. So I saw that with Raquel you guys were cooperating and working on your Venn diagrams where you illustrated the characteristics of non-Arctic and Arctic plants and then compared one another, their similarities and differences. See that you did a wonderful job, so thank you for participating. Now, based on what you observed and what you know now about Arctic and non-Arctic plants, I'd like to ask you guys, why do you think that Arctic plants have this specific features? Like, why do you think they can grow under the snow, whereas non-Arctic plants cannot? Or why do they have hairy stems and non-Arctic plants don't? Why do you think this? Help me out, I want to hear your ideas. What do you think? What do you hypothesize about? It doesn't have to be right, you just shoot it. Alright, yes, so that's true. They need to adapt to the weather and conditions that they are surrounded with, so that's why they developed this. That's a really good answer, thank you for sharing that. Alright, now moving on, I want to focus on 3 of these features that Arctic plants have. The first one is how they have dark hairs on stems and leaves. So, as you guys observed and mentioned before, Arctic plants have dark hairs on their stems and leaves. Another feature that I want to focus on is their ability to grow under the snow. And lastly, I want to focus on their small leaf structure. So for the first feature, dark hairs on stems and leaves, why do you think plants, well, Arctic plants, have dark hairs on their stems and leaves? Yes? Exactly. This is a really good answer. Thank you for sharing that. They use them for protection. But what are they protecting themselves for? The cold weather. So they use it to keep them warm. It's like when you see polar bears, they're very hairy too, right? Polar bears live in the Arctic too, and that's how they keep themselves warm, just like Arctic plants. And before we move on to our second feature, I just want to focus here on this thing, dark hairs. Did you know that there's a scientific name that refers to that? So instead of saying dark hairs on stems or dark hairs on leaves, scientists say trichomes or trichomes. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. But instead of saying dark hairs and stems, you can now say trichomes and stems or trichomes and leaves. It's a scientific name for that. So remember that. Alright, now our second feature. They have the ability to grow under the snow. Why do you think they have the ability to grow under the snow? Ooh. Alright, that's a really good answer. To carry photosynthesis. So, we all know, you guys mentioned it in your Venn diagram, that both non-Arctic and Arctic plants need photosynthesis in order to grow and live, basically. And well, they need oxygen, water, and of course the sun. So by growing under the snow, plants can carry out photosynthesis on very cold weathers. And there's another reason why they grow under the snow, and it's that of the Arctic plants that are flowering plants, it allows the flowers to grow quickly. Of course, this only happens when summer begins. It's not kind of confusing because they grow under the snow, but they grow quickly when summer begins by growing under the snow first. Yeah, sorry, that's a bit confusing. Any questions? Is everyone following up right here? All right, well, moving on to our third feature, small leaf structure. Why do you think Arctic plants, or some Arctic plants, have small leaf structure? This one's a bit tricky or confusing. That's a really good answer. You've noticed that plants with small leaves can grow on rocks. So that's actually one of the reasons why Arctic plants have small leaf structure, because it enables them to grow on rocks. And I'm gonna add up to that, they do not need soil. And as you must know, in the Arctic, there's not much soil, it's mostly snow. So by having small leaf structure, small leaf structure plants have the ability to grow in places where there's not much soil. And there's something in common between the growing under snow and small leaf structure, and that is that flowers grow quickly as well. So by having small leaf structure and by growing under the snow, Arctic plants' flowers grow more quickly. Of course, once again, this only happens when the weather gets warmer or when summer begins. Alright, so just to recap, we have dark hairs and stems and leaves for protection and to keep them warm. Should I say trichomes and stems and leaves? The ability to grow under snow to carry photosynthesis, and flowers grow quickly when summer begins, and small leaf structure because it can grow in rocks and do not need soil, and flowers grow quickly when summer begins as well. Alright guys, thank you so much for your answers and participation. Now, I want to ask you one more question. So, from what you observed and included in your Venn diagrams, which is here, we can see some similarities and some differences, right? And now that we expanded a bit more on these three features about Arctic plants, I'd like you guys to tell me, or not you guys, but I want us as a class to come up with a consensus definition, that is a definition or answer to our essential question, what factors affect the survival of Arctic plants, that we all agree on. So, anyone wants to start saying or adding something to our answer? I'll put it right here. That's a really good answer. Would anyone like to add something to that? I'm gonna repeat what she said. She said that Arctic plants' capability of growing in the Arctic. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna rephrase that. Got confused a bit. So she said that an Arctic plant's capability of growing is influenced by various factors. I'm gonna write that down. An Arctic plant's capability of growing in the Arctic influenced by various factors. Yeah. I think that's a good idea. He said that it'd be a good idea if we add some examples of these factors, such as the ones we were talking about today. Would everyone be okay with that? Yeah? Alright, so an Arctic plant's capability of growing in the Arctic is influenced by various factors, such as their ability to grow under the snow, their small leaf structure, and the dark hairs in their stems and leaves. Or instead of dark hairs, would you like us to use the new scientific term that we learned? Yeah? Amazing. And alright, so would anyone like to read our consensus answer for me, please? Alright, thank you so much for reading it out loud. So now I'm just going to go back and reread our essential question and our consensus answers. So, what factors affect the survival of Arctic plants? An Arctic plant's capability of growing in the Arctic is influenced by various factors, such as their ability to grow under the snow, their small leaf structure, and the trichomes on their leaves and stems. Amazing. Alright guys, so we're almost done with the lesson. There's only one final part that Fabienne is going to lead to you guys. And I just want to thank you for participating and sharing your ideas and comments. And before I move on, I'd like to know if there's any questions or anything that is not clear or something that you guys would like to add up. Alright, thank you so much again, and Fabienne's going to go on with the next part.
You guys made some great inferences in the last activity. Congratulations. So now we're going to look at the different factors that affected, so just like the other activity, we're going to look at the different factors that affect Arctic plants, but this time we're going to extend it to look at the different factors that affect other living things that are in the Arctic. So we're going to look at Arctic mammals. So what do you guys think is required for an Arctic mammal to survive in the cold weather of the Arctic? Yeah? Exactly, yeah. So they need to stay warm. So just like the plants, they need something to keep them insulated, to keep them warm. Can you guys give me some examples of Arctic plants, Arctic animals, sorry, that you guys know? Yes, polar bears are definitely Arctic mammals. What else? Anybody else? Okay, that's fine. We're going to be looking at 2 non-Arctic mammals and then 2 Arctic mammals to compare physically the traits that they have that enable them to survive in the cold. So I'm going to show you guys the 2 non-Arctic mammals and then the 2 Arctic mammals. And I'm going to leave this on the board throughout the activity. So first we have the elephant. Notice physically how this elephant is. I'm going to keep going. Then we have the giraffe. Are there any similarities between the giraffe and the elephant? Just keep that in mind as we go through. We have the Arctic wolf. So that is an Arctic mammal. And I think you guys should already be looking at differences between the Arctic wolf and let's say the giraffe. Physically, what are the differences? And then finally we have the polar bear, which I feel like the polar bear might be a little bit easier for finding the differences and the similarities. Okay, and so as we go through, we do this activity, we're going to be using this table. So I'm going to put in your observations, and then we're going to put in the inferences that we made based off those observations. Can someone remind me what an inference is? Yep. Exactly. So Simon just mentioned how an inference is based off observation. So it's a conclusion you come to based on what you have observed, and you observe those things with the 5 senses. So can we get some observations? What do you guys observe in the pictures? Let me put them back on the board. Okay, so tell me what animal you want to look at and I will put the animal up. Okay, so Kayla said she wanted us to put it on the polar bear. So what do you notice about the polar bear, Kayla, that's that you think helps keep it warm? Yeah, so you see there's a lot of fur on this polar bear. It's very, very full of fur. And if you compare that to, let's say, the elephant that lives in a warmer climate, the elephant has, physically, we can't really see any fur. We can't see any fur. So that would definitely be something. So let's put that down as one of your observations. Polar bears. Let's put Arctic animals. Have lots of fur. And what inference could we make based off that? It could be Kayla, it could be anybody else. Okay, Matthew. So you would say the fur keeps them warm? Oops. Does anybody agree with what Matthew said? Does anybody disagree with what Matthew said? Put your thumbs up if you agree with what Matthew said. Okay, so I think everyone's pretty much on the same page. Let's go back to the animals. Okay, Samantha, you want us to look at the Arctic wolf. So what do you notice about the Arctic wolf and compare that to the other animals? Small ears, that's interesting. If we go up and look at the giraffe definitely has bigger ears than the Arctic wolf, and the elephant has way bigger ears than the Arctic wolf. So I'm gonna put that down, and that's a very interesting observation. Small ears. Now, the inference might be a little bit more difficult to come up with. So what do you guys think the inference is? Let's try to think back to the Arctic plants that we looked at and the different characteristics that we noticed with them to figure out exactly what that characteristic could be for the... Sorry. Let me keep going.
Try to hold it in.
I'm gonna keep going. Sorry, Hannah. Okay. So... let's look at the... I'm so sorry. Okay, let's look at the characteristics again. So would someone have an idea maybe of what inference they could come, like why the small ears would play into them staying warm? Could someone... Okay, Henry said because if it's smaller, then it doesn't require as much to keep it warm, which that's an interesting path. So actually let's keep going on that path. Does anyone have something to add? Does someone agree or disagree with what Henry just said? Yes, so Samantha brought up the leaves on and the flowers, leaves on the Arctic plants and how they were much smaller. And when we looked at that, we talked about how it was easier to conserve heat because it's a smaller surface. So this idea would still apply. So I'm gonna put in the inferences. Henry and Samantha both together were able to come up with this inference based on this observation. I'm gonna put in that it's easier to conserve heat like small leaves. Oops. On Arctic plants. Okay, perfect. Is there anything else? Let's go back to these animals. Is there anything else that you guys notice looking, let's say, for example, we're looking at the elephant over here, and then the giraffe. Do you want to maybe go back to the polar bear? If they're, let's see. So the polar bear here is walking on snow, very cold surface. So is the Arctic wolf, as you can see, is walking on snow. And then if we look here at the elephant and the giraffe, so the giraffe right here, she's walking on grass, which it looks pretty warm where she is. And the elephant's also walking on, well, a very like warm surface. So what do you think they would need? Like what could, let's say if we're picturing us, in the summertime we wear sneakers, and in the winter we wear boots. So what type of observation can we make based off that? Yeah, William? You think it has something to do with their paws? That's a very interesting thought. Let's try to build up on that. So William just said he thought that it has to do with their paws. Can anybody else add on, or maybe do you guys agree with what William said? Put your thumbs up if you agree. Okay, and put your thumbs down if you disagree. So it seems to be most people are agreeing. If you agree with William, do you want to share why? Or if you disagree, you can also share why as well. Okay, Samantha. So you agree with William because it's the same as humans. We have that extra layer to keep us warm. Okay. And can I get someone that disagrees with William to see just why for any possible reason? Okay, Henry, you disagree because you think there's no difference. Can you explain, elaborate on that? Okay, so Henry brought up that in the summertime, the surface you're walking on is still very, very warm. So you still need some protection. So he's kind of, basically Henry is saying that it's the same. Whether the protection that you would need when it's cold versus the protection you would need when it's hot should be the same in theory. That's a very valid point. So actually, the paws of polar bears, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of a polar bear's paw. I'm gonna try to pull one up for you guys. They do have extra padding on their paws to keep them warm and to prevent from, like, as they're walking on the cold surface, to prevent them getting too cold. So they do have that extra padding on them. It's like a black padding. Let me try to show you guys a picture. So very valid points that on hot surfaces, it's a much harder thing. You know, you also need some type of protection against the heat that you'll feel when you're walking on a hot surface. Just like when we're going to the beach, we have to wear flip-flops because sometimes the sand is too hot. However, there is an extra layer of protection on polar bear and Arctic wolves' paws to prevent them from being too cold. So I'm actually going to put that one in. I will be honest with you, that one was a little bit harder. So padding on paws to keep their feet warm. Well, I'll say their paws warm. Perfect. So just now we've basically, that brings us to the end of our activity. We looked into 3 different observations that you guys have come up with, that you guys made with these pictures that I showed you, and we looked at 3 inferences. So can somebody name one of the inferences, one of the characteristics, one of the observations that we saw, and one of the inferences that we came up with for that observation? Okay, yes. Can I get another one? Yes, thank you, exactly. So Hannah mentioned that the sharp claws and the padding on the paws is to grip on the ice and for better insulation on the ice. Very, very true. Perfect. Okay, and then William just talked about the small ears, right? He mentioned the small ears again, and that having the smaller ears, like the smaller leaves, it's better for conserving heat. So thank you guys so much for participating in this activity and for being so engaged and so interested. It was a lot of fun, and yeah.